ChatGPT said, Ava Richardson steps into the airport with the ease of someone who moves through the world on her own terms. She has flown hundreds of times before, carrying her company's hopes in her hand luggage and her vision in her mind. Today, she is traveling to San Francisco for a tech conference that could change everything for her fast-growing startup. She wears a tailored navy suit that fits her stature perfectly, and her natural confidence seems to follow her through the sliding doors of the terminal. Her black leather briefcase swings gently at her side, and the airport lights catch the gold accents on her watch and earrings. She glances at the departure board. Flight 276 to San Francisco is on time. She has 2 hours before boarding. Enough time for a quick coffee and to review her speech notes one last time. She even has time to smile politely at the barista who hands her a cappuccino. The airport feels familiar, almost comfortable. She knows its noises and its crowds. She knows the bright windows that look out over the runway, the signs that point, her 2 gates and lounges. Yet today, something in the air seems charged, as if fate itself waits behind gate 22. She approaches the TSA line. The line moves slowly, people shifting forward inch by inch, everyone clutching passports and boarding passes. Ava's heartbeat remains steady. She is used to security checks. She has done this many times. She places her laptop and her watch, and her jacket into the plastic bin. She steps forward when the agent waves her on. She breathes out in relief. The machine beeps. She steps through. Everything seems normal. She reaches for her belongings, her jacket, her laptop, her phone. All returned to her by a polite agent who barely glances at her name on the boarding pass. Ava pauses, adjusts her suit, and offers a small thank you. She picks up her things and moves on toward the gate area. She can almost taste the smooth security of being a successful business leader, the kind that carries her company's weight and her own reputation with grace. She finds a seat. She settles in by the window, watching planes taxi and take off. The morning sun paints long shadows across the runway. She opens her laptop and reads the first line of her speech. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. She smiles. She feels calm, prepared. A voice crackles over the loudspeaker. Now boarding Flight 276 to San Francisco. Priority passengers and first class. She straightens her back, closes her laptop, and carries her things toward the gate. The line moves quickly. She presents her boarding pass to the gate agent. He stows it, then hands it back. She glances at him. He nods without looking up. She steps onto the jet bridge. The smell of jet fuel mingles with recycled air. The narrow hallway leads her into the cabin. She feels the soft carpet beneath her feet. Gentle music plays through the speakers. She notices how the flight attendants move with practiced kindness, welcoming each passenger home or to their next destination. A flight attendant greets her. Good morning, ma'am. Seat 2A. Yes, thank you, Ava replies, her voice level and polite. She walks down the aisle, settling into the window seat. The seatbelt clicks. She leans back. She closes her eyes. For a brief moment, savoring the hum of the plane before it roars into the sky. In front of her, the cabin hums with quiet excitement. Business travelers tap on laptops. Families adjust tablets and headphones. Small child behind her giggles. Ava reaches into her briefcase and pulls out her speech notes one last time. She reviews bullet points in her mind, but more than that, she breathes in the confidence that comes from hard work and vision. She is someone who has fought to be here, who has hired engineers and designers and dreamers to create a product that will change how people connect online. She thinks of her team back at headquarters, burning the midnight oil to meet deadlines. She thinks of her mother's proud face at her last fundraising event. She thinks of herself as a young intern, full of hope, walking through similar terminals, dreaming of this very moment. The captain's voice comes through the intercom. It is calm, professional. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 276 to San Francisco. We are third in line for takeoff and should be wheels up in about 10 minutes. Please ensure your seat belts are fastened and all electronic devices are set to airplane mode. We appreciate your cooperation and look forward to serving you. Ava nods, clicking her seatbelt tighter. She places her notes gently on her lap. The plane's doors close. The engines whine. The plane moves forward. The force of acceleration presses her into her seat. She glances out the window as the terminal fades behind her, as the city stretches below. The patchwork of roads and buildings like a final reminder of the world she is leaving behind for a few hours. Then comes the climb, the plane tilting upward, the clouds rolling past the window. She watches them and feels a sense of freedom. The world below seems smaller and more manageable from this height. She imagines how her speech will land with the audience, how her words will ripple out and bring new partners to her cause. A flight attendant passes by. "Can I offer you something to drink, ma'am?" "Just water, please," Ava replies. The attendant smiles and walks on. Ava sips the cool water and closes her eyes for a moment, letting the quiet of the cabin wash over her. She taps her fingers against the paper of her notes, running through points on product features and market strategy. She rehearses lines in her head, stories of early customers, quotes from advisors, the big vision of global expansion. She feels a surge of pride. She is ready. As the plane levels off, the seatbelt signs switch off. The flight attendants begin their service. The clink of carts and the soft murmur of voices fill the space. Ava opens her laptop again, intending to type a quick email to her investors. She clicks the power button. Nothing happens. She tries again. Still nothing. Her heart skips. Presses harder. It still will not turn on. She glances sideways at the passenger in the aisle seat. No help there. She sets the laptop back in her briefcase. She breathes deeply. She can survive without this device for a few hours. Besides, all her key points live in her memory now. She relaxes. She reaches instead for her phone, checking messages. All quiet. She leans back and gazes out the window at a bank of clouds. For a moment, she loses herself in dreams. A world where her company is the leader, where access to technology is fair, where people from every background can succeed. She smiles. The plane shifts slightly, a gentle reminder of the machine's power. She pulls out her wallet and checks her boarding pass again. Then she looks up, meeting the gaze of the flight attendant. They share a brief nod. Ava feels at home here, high above the world, with nothing but possibilities ahead. She sits up straighter. She decides to review her notes one last time, speaking softly to herself. She whispers phrases, testing her tone. She taps her foot lightly in excitement. She doesn't notice the flight attendant's curious glance. She doesn't see the young mother across the aisle steal a quick peek and smile at her calm confidence. She is completely focused on what lies ahead. She has no idea that in just a few moments, her journey toward the stage will be interrupted. She has no idea that everything she has built, every late night and every early meeting, will be tested. But she does know one thing. She is ready for whatever comes next. She breathes in and holds that moment of calm, that sense of purpose, that feeling that she belongs. And as the clouds drift by her window, she thinks nothing can shake her confidence. Yet this flight, so ordinary at first, will soon become a turning point she could never have imagined. Ava was just settling back into her window seat when she noticed a sudden shift in the cabin's mood. A security officer stood near the front, his expression serious. He spoke quietly with a flight attendant. The attendant's polite smile faded. A murmur rippled through the first-class cabin. Ava looked up, puzzled. She pressed her lips together and waited. The officer approached her row. Ava felt her heart tighten. Hey. She straightened in her seat and offered a friendly nod. The officer said, "Ms. Richardson, I need you to come with me." His voice was calm, but firm. Ava blinked, surprised. "Excuse me?" she asked softly. The officer repeated his request. Ava's mind raced. She slid out of her seat, leaving her briefcase and notes behind. Other passengers watched. Some whispered. Few took out their phones. Ava kept her voice steady. "May I know why?" she asked. The officer looked at his partner. He did not answer. Motioned for her to follow. Ava gathered her composure and walked down the aisle. She felt her suit jacket brush against the row of seats. She heard the quiet click of cameras. She did not yet understand why she was being singled out. In the aisle, the cabin lights reflected off the polished overhead bins. Ava glanced back at her belongings. The flight attendant who had greeted her looked away, avoiding her eyes. Ava felt a sudden prick of embarrassment. She held herself tall. She met the gaze of a business traveler across the aisle. He gave her a sympathetic look and mouthed, "I'm sorry." That small kindness steadied her. She stepped onto the jet bridge, the officer just ahead. The door closed behind her with a dull thud. She turned to face the cabin through the glass partition. Hundreds of eyes, some curious, some judgmental, looked back. A camera phone zoomed in on her face. She felt exposed, as if she stood on a stage under harsh lights. The world had narrowed to this moment. She took a slow breath and followed. The officer down a narrow hallway. Her high heels clicked against the metal floor. She tried to steady her breathing. She replayed her last thoughts. She had done everything right. She was a respected CEO. She had security clearances, VIP status. None of that seemed to matter now. The hallway led to a small service door marked crew only. Beyond it was a cramped corridor lined with dull gray walls. The officer guided her to a less crowded area and asked her to wait. Ava set her chin high and kept her shoulders back. She reached into her jacket pocket and touched her phone. She resisted the urge to check social media. She couldn't bear seeing what was already spreading. A moment later, another officer arrived. He carried a clipboard and wore a name badge. He stepped forward and said, "Ms. Richardson, we're conducting a secondary screening." Ava's lips pressed together. "On what grounds?" she asked, her voice firm but polite. The officer flipped through his papers and said, "Just routine. We need to verify some details." Ava closed her eyes for a second. She recalled the morning's calm confidence. Now that feeling felt fragile. She opened her eyes and faced him. "I will cooperate," she said, "but I would appreciate an explanation." The officer shook his head. "I can't share more." He gestured toward a small chair. "Please sit." The chair was uncomfortable, with a stiff back and no armrests. Ava sat and placed her handbag on her lap. The officer began asking standard questions: name, date of birth, business affiliation. Ava answered each clearly. She leaned forward when he asked to inspect her ID. She handed over her driver's license and passport. The officer studied them. Turning them in his hand, he looked at her headshot and back. A shadow crossed his face, though she could not tell why. She watched his eyes flicker between her documents and her face. She reminded herself not to show frustration. She stayed calm, controlled. Another officer entered with a laptop. He typed in details. He looked at the screen and frowned. The silent room felt colder. Ava's pulse throbbed in her temples. She felt the weight of each second. Finally, the officer closed the laptop and said, "Thank you for your patience. You may go." Gave her documents back. Ava stood. She straightened her suit jacket. She took a moment to collect herself before walking back through the service door. As she stepped onto the jet bridge again, her eyes met those of the original flight attendant. The attendant tried to smile but failed. Ava offered a polite nod. Then she saw the carrier in the aisle. The gate agent held her boarding pass. She took it and said quietly, "I'm sorry about the delay." Ava forced a small smile. "It's all right," she replied. Then she noticed her luggage. Her briefcase and jacket lay on a cart, looked untouched. Relief washed over her. She picked them up, slung the bag over her shoulder, and stepped back into the cabin. Business as usual, she tried to think. But the cabin was not as it had been. Phones glowed in many hands. Whispered voices spread rumors. The seat next to her was empty now. The passenger had moved seats. She lowered herself back into 2A and secured her seatbelt. Her heart still pounded. She set her briefcase on her lap and calmed her breath. She told herself this was a minor interruption. She closed her eyes. She counted slowly, 1, 2, 3. But stillness lasted only a moment. A gentle ping sounded. She glanced at her phone. Notification from a news site flashed. Black CEO humiliated on flight. She tapped it. A video had been posted seconds ago. In the clip, she stood between two officers, looking poised but tense. The caption read, "Who is she?" Airline pulls CEO for no reason. Comments scrolled quickly. This is racial profiling. Shame on them. I hope she sues. The video had thousands of views already. Ava's chest tightened. Felt anger, hurt, defiance. She paused the video. She closed her eyes again. She thought of her team waiting at the conference. She thought of her speech. She reminded herself of her purpose. She would not let this moment define her. She opened her laptop to check her notes again, but her screen remained dark. She set it aside. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small notebook. She flipped it open to handwritten bullet points. She tapped a pen against the page and forced her mind to focus on facts. Market share, user growth, partnership deals. She whispered key phrases to herself. She ran her fingers over the words she had written. The cabin lights dimmed slightly. As the flight attendants prepared for takeoff, the engine's roar filled her ears. She straightened in her seat. She refused to let the humiliation steal her calm. She closed her notebook and leaned back, ready to move forward. We should speak with her team when she landed. She would handle this with grace. She would not show fear. Ava saw a fellow passenger across the aisle watching her. He gave her a tight nod. She nodded back. She did not know his name, but she felt he understood. He offered silent support, reminding her she was not alone. Around her, the cabin settled into a hush. The plane rose. Into the sky, Ava watched the city lights fade below. She thought of what came next. Her speech, her investors, her vision. She took a steady breath and opened her notebook once more. She was in charge of her story now. The moments of embarrassment belonged to the past. What mattered was what she would do next. And Ava Richardson never backed down. Ava landed in San Francisco just as the late afternoon sun turned the sky pink. She walked off the plane with her usual calm, but inside her mind stormed with questions. How could a routine flight become a moment of hurt and humiliation? Had sat through that silent corridor, answered questions she did not understand, and watched her dignity feel chipped away. Yet now, as the cool bay breeze brushed her face, she knew there was no time for lingering pain. She had a company, too. Lead a conference to address and a reputation to shape. Her car ride from the airport was quiet. A driver in a dark suit opened the door and loaded her luggage. Ava settled into the back seat. She gazed out the window at the city skyline, the bridges and skyscrapers lit by the soft glow of street lamps. She thought of her team back home, working late under fluorescent lights, trusting her to steer this ship well. She drew a deep breath and straightened her posture. She would show them that a stumble would not stop her. It would only fuel her resolve at the company's local office. Ava entered a sleek glass building where the walls held photos of their past successes. There were framed pictures of excited engineers unveiling the first prototype, photos of investors, shaking hands, all smiling bright. But today, those images seemed to remind her that success did not come without challenge. She tapped her badge at the security desk and walked through the lobby. Staffers peeked up and offered polite nods. Hey, nodded back, her expression steady. In the executive boardroom, her senior team waited. A large oak table dominated the room. Around it sat the chief operating officer, the head of communications, the general counsel, and her most trusted advisors, the people who had guided her company from startup to major player in the tech world. Phones and laptops were open, ready. As Ava took her seat at the head of the table, she felt the weight of leadership settle on her shoulders once more. Before anyone spoke, Ava opened her laptop and projected the viral video onto the big screen. The familiar faces of the officers and herself appeared in grainy footage. She watched herself standing between two uniformed men, her posture unwavering, but her eyes revealing a mix of confusion and hurt. She saw the cameras of passengers pointed at her. She heard the murmurs in the cabin. In that moment, she felt the memory of embarrassment all over again. Yet she did not flinch. The head of communications cleared his throat. That video has over 2 million views already, he said. People are reacting strongly on social media. Many are outraged. He pointed to a slide showing tweets and posts. They're demanding answers. They're showing support for you. This could blow up even more. Ava nodded. I know, she said softly. This is bigger than me. It's about how people are treated and how issues of bias still divide us. Her voice was controlled but carried emotion. We have two choices. Stay silent and let this blow over, or we speak up and use our influence to push for change. The general counsel leaned forward. She was a calm woman in her 50s with keen gray eyes. Ava, legally, we have a case. You were wrongfully detained. But a lawsuit could go on for months or years with uncertain outcome. It could draw still more attention, both good and bad. The head of communications added, a public statement calling for an apology could satisfy the public. But without a real demand, the airline might just make a hollow apology and nothing changes. Ava closed her eyes for a moment and pictured the sterile corridor, the long jet bridge, and the looks of strangers. She remembered how it felt to be a respected CEO one second and a suspect the next, for no reason she could see.
Oh.
She opened her eyes, meeting each person around the table. We have influence. We have commitments from that airline joint projects, marketing partnerships, travel credits worth billions. We can leverage that. She paused. I want to demand that they apologize publicly, retrain their staff on bias and sensitivity, and review their policies. If they do not comply within 72 hours, we pull all our funding and end the partnership. The coup tapped his pen. That is bold. It will put serious pressure on them. Our stakeholders will notice. But they also might push back. I could face legal threats. Are you prepared for that? His tone was respectful, concerned. Ava leaned forward, her palms flat on the table. I'm prepared. This isn't just about business. It's about standing up for our values. We built this company on respect, inclusion, and fairness. If we don't defend those principles now, then we lose everything we stand for. Right. Was a silence as the team absorbed her words. The head of communications spoke next. If we do this, we need a clear public message. We have to explain why we're doing it. We can say, we stand against discrimination. We expect our partners to uphold respect for every individual. Call on the airline to act now. He drafted quick phrases on his laptop. He can prepare press releases, social media posts, and reach out to major news outlets. Counsel nodded. We should prepare a letter to the airline's board. Say what we demand. Apology, training, policy review, and a deadline. If they don't meet it, we'll withdraw the $5 billion in planned collaboration and travel credits. She clicked to a slide showing legal language. Simple, firm, non-threatening, but clear. Ava felt a calm rush of pride. Her team was skilled, loyal, and ready to fight. She watched them work, crafting language, anticipating responses, planning logistics. She remembered when the company was small, her team huddled in a tiny office. They sat in a boardroom, planning a global statement that would ripple through the airline industry. She thought of how far they had come. When the strategy was set, Ava asked for one more thing. Let's set up a call with our diversity and inclusion committee. I want them on board. I want them to review the training plan and policy changes. This can't be just PR, it must be real change. The diversity lead, a thoughtful woman named Maria, nodded. She promised to convene the committee by evening. The meeting wound down. Ava stood and thanked everyone. She felt her confidence return stronger for the plan. As she left the boardroom, her chief of staff handed her a glass of water. She drank it in long sips, letting the cool liquid settle her mind. She walked toward her hotel, her steps sure. The city lights glimmered as dusk turned to night. Felt a quiet determination. Tomorrow, she would deliver her speech at the conference. Then, she would unleash their plan. At her hotel room, Ava unpacked her suitcase. She set out her speech notes on the desk, then opened her laptop and drafted the formal letter to the airline. She used firm but respectful language. She attached video screenshots. She detailed her demands and the 72-hour deadline. She saved the draft and sent it to the general counsel for review. Within minutes, the counsel replied with a few edits. Ava approved them and scheduled the letter to send that evening to the airline's board and C-suite executives. Next, she worked with her communications team to finalize the press release. They tailored a headline: Tech CEO demands action after biased treatment by major airline. The body of the release explained the incident, asserted her stance against discrimination, and announced the forthcoming withdrawal of funding if their demands were not met. She approved graphics that included the company logo and a simple line: "Respect is non-negotiable." Late in the night, Ava sat on the edge of the hotel bed and reflected. She would speak at the conference in just hours. She would talk about technology and innovation, yes, but also about values and leadership. She thought about the passengers who watched her escorted off the plane, about those who saw only the uniformed officers and assumed she must have done something wrong. Thought of every person who had ever been treated unfairly. She realized that her own voice could shine a light on the darkness others faced alone as the clock approached midnight. Ava sent the communications materials to her team. She then tucked her speech notes into her journal. She closed the laptop and drew the curtains. She lay on the bed, her mind buzzing with plans. But beneath it all was a deep certainty. She would use her power to demand fairness. She would show the world that respect was not just a nice idea, but a foundation for real business and real lives. Finally, she let herself rest. Tomorrow would be a big day. Her speech, the media reactions, the airline's decision. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since boarding that flight, she felt the tension begin to slip away. She felt ready to face what came next, knowing she had assembled the right team, the right plan, and the right purpose. And as she drifted to sleep, she held on to that sense of purpose, to make sure no one else would have to face the humiliation she had endured without someone standing up for them. ChatGPT said. Ava woke before dawn, her mind already racing with the day's work. She reached for her phone and saw the time, 5:30 a.m. She had 3 hours before her keynote speech at the conference. But first, she had to send the ultimatum. To the airline's board, she dressed quickly in a dark gray suit that felt strong like armor. She brushed her hair back into a neat bun and applied just a touch of makeup. She did not want to waste time. She needed to move fast. In her hotel room, she opened her laptop and reviewed the final draft of the letter. The words stood out clearly on the screen. Dear members of the board, it began. I write to you not only as a major investor, but as a person who insists on respect for every individual. Last evening, your security team removed me from a flight without cause. This treatment is unacceptable, she read on. We demand a public apology, a full retraining of all staff on bias and sensitivity, and a thorough review of your policies. You have 72 hours to comply. Failure to do so will result in immediate withdrawal of the $5 billion in funding and all partnership agreements. She felt the weight of those words. They were firm but fair. She thought of her young company, of her team's faith in her leadership. She knew that making this stand would send shockwaves through the industry, but she also knew she had to use her power. She clicked send and watched the message disappear into cyberspace. Then she set up a read receipt to confirm when it was opened. She closed the laptop and took a deep breath. The ultimatum was out. Now she had to focus on her speech. At 8 a.m., Ava stepped onto the stage. The auditorium was packed. She saw rows of attendees leaning forward in their seats. Her heart pounded with excitement. She began her talk on technology and innovation with confidence. Her voice was strong and clear. She shared her vision for the future: more equitable access to digital tools, new platforms for small businesses, training programs for underserved communities. She spoke of data security, user experience, and global growth. She told stories of customers whose lives had changed because of her company's app. But she never forgot the purpose beneath her words. Midway through her talk, she paused. She looked out at the audience. Before I finish, she said softly, I need to share something personal. The room fell quiet. She told them what had happened on the plane. She did not name the airline at first. She described the moment she was pulled aside, the questions she could not answer, the feeling of being treated as if she did not belong. She shared the viral video playing in her mind. Then she said, Today I sent a letter to the airline asking for an apology and real change. I've given them 72 hours. I am prepared to withdraw $5 billion in support if they refuse. A murmur spread across the room. Some faces looked surprised. Others nodded in approval. A few held up their phones, recording her words. She finished her speech on a high note, weaving her message of respect into her vision for technology. She stepped off the stage. She felt a mix of relief and pride. She had spoken her truth. Backstage, her communications team huddled around a laptop. The email to the airline had been opened within minutes, they reported. The read receipt showed the general counsel of the airline, but there was no immediate reply. Ava's phone began to buzz with messages, tweets from supporters, direct messages. From other CEOs offering solidarity, comments on LinkedIn praising her courage. Her company's public relations director smiled. "You're trending worldwide," he said. "This is going to hit headlines in every major outlet." Ava nodded. She knew attention would bring both praise and scrutiny. Meanwhile, at the airline's headquarters, the board convened an emergency meeting. In a glass-walled conference room high above the city, the airline CEO paced at the head of the table. She was a seasoned executive with years of experience. Around her sat board members and senior managers. On the big screen was Ava's letter, bold and direct. The airline's general counsel summarized the situation. She threatens to pull $5 billion in funding. That includes our loyalty program credits, our co-marketing funds, and future joint ventures. This is a serious financial risk. One board member, the CFO, frowned. $5 billion is nearly 10% of our planned investments for the next 2 years. If she follows through, our stock price will take a hit. Our partners will notice. This could cause a broader loss in confidence. Another member, head of HR, spoke up. But we also face pressure on social media. People are calling out racism. If we appear to ignore this, the backlash could be worse. We need to act quickly and decisively. The CEO raised her voice. What do we do first? Do we issue an apology now? Or do we investigate further? The general counsel recommended a two-step approach, an immediate public statement expressing regret for the incident, followed by a commitment to review and retrain staff. The head of training and development promised to design a bias and sensitivity program within 48 hours. The board debated the wording of the apology. Some wanted to say we apologize for the distress, while others insisted on we apologize for the wrongful removal of Ms. Richardson. They agreed that naming her directly would show sincerity. Back at the airport where the incident had occurred, employees watched the news. Screens in the staff lounge showed reports of the ultimatum and of Ava's speech. A security officer who had been on duty that day shook his head. He hadn't known who she was at the time. Now he saw his actions replayed on every screen. Felt regret. He hoped the retraining would include clear guidelines on treating every passenger equally. By midday, the airline released its public apology. The CEO recorded a short video message. She looked sincere and earnest. She said, "We deeply regret the experience Ms. Ava Richardson had on one of our flights. We apologize for the hurt and frustration she endured. We commit to a full review of our procedures, immediate bias and sensitivity training for all staff, and updated policies to ensure this never happens again." The statement ended with, "We meet Ms. Richardson's demands and will provide written confirmation by the end of the 72-hour deadline." Within hours, headlines appeared. Airline apologizes to Black Tech CEO and billion-dollar ultimatum forces airline into change. Financial analysts updated their reports, noting the airline's swift response as a positive sign. On social media, praise poured in for Ava and for the airline's willingness to change. Yet some commentators questioned whether the apology was enough. They asked for details on the training and for oversight by an independent group. Ava monitored the news with her team. She saw the apology and felt a mix of satisfaction and caution. She did not want an empty statement. That night, at a small dinner with her closest advisors, she reviewed the airline's words. "This is a start," she said. "But we need proof of action. We need specifics on the training program, the policy changes, and a public commitment to transparency." Her communications director nodded. "You can send a follow-up letter asking for those details. We'll give them until the original deadline." They drafted the letter on the spot, listing the training modules, the number of employees to be trained, third-party oversight, and updated policy language. They scheduled it to go out the next morning. Meanwhile, inside the airline's training department, plans hurried forward. A consultant firm was hired to design workshops. Materials were drafted on recognizing unconscious bias, respectful communication, and cultural awareness. Managers were asked to sign up their teams for sessions starting in 3 days. The head of training sent invitations to employees at every level. There would be online modules and in-person workshops. A panel of external experts would audit the process and publish a report after completion. 2 days before the deadline, Ava's follow-up letter arrived. She read it in her hotel room, feeling a stronger sense of assurance. The letter was clear. It named the training provider, described the program schedule, and pledged to post a summary report on the airline's website. The policy changes, adding a requirement for security officers to receive manager approval before removing any passenger, were spelled out. She saw that the airline meant business. Ava called the airline's general counsel directly. They talked for 20 minutes. She thanked him for the swift action and asked to stay updated on progress. He promised weekly updates and the final audit report. Ava hung up, feeling a sense of closure. She had used her position to demand fairness. She had forced change, and she had done it without anger, but with firm resolve. On the eve of the deadline, the airline posted its details online. News articles covered the story again. How a tech CEO changed an airline's culture. The public response was mostly positive. Ava's own statement thanked the airline for meeting her demands and for taking real steps to improve. She said she hoped other companies would follow suit. She added that no one should ever feel invisible or suspect on a plane. As the 72-hour mark passed, Ava closed her laptop. She was back at home, surrounded by her family and colleagues, celebrating a victory that felt bigger than business. She looked at messages of gratitude from people who felt seen and heard. She realized her experience had sparked a conversation about respect and bias far beyond one airline. She thought of every traveler who boarded a plane with hope and dignity. She smiled. Ava watched the sunrise from her home office window as birds sang in the quiet morning air. The 72-hour deadline had passed the night before. She felt a lightness in her chest, like a burden had been lifted. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Messages from friends, from colleagues in other industries, even from strangers who had seen her speech or read the news stories. Many thanked her for standing up and making real change. She smiled, feeling both proud and humbled. She turned to her laptop and opened the airline's public report. It lay out the training schedule, the exact steps taken to retrain thousands of employees, and the new policy that required managers to approve any decision. To remove a passenger from a flight, there was also an independent audit planned for 3 months later, with results to be shared publicly. As she read, she felt the power of her actions. She had not only forced an apology, but real steps toward fairness and respect. Later that morning, Ava met with her team in the conference room. They sat around the table, tired but triumphant. The head of communications opened the meeting with a slide showing headlines from around the world. CEO uses $5 billion as leverage for racial justice. How one woman changed an airline's culture. A lesson in power and respect. The room buzzed with energy. Ava began by thanking everyone. She told them she was proud of how they had acted quickly and thoughtfully. She reminded them that this was more than a business victory. It was a stand for human dignity. She spoke softly but firmly. We showed that respect is not just a word, it is an action. We can use our influence to protect people's dignity. She paused and looked around the room. Some faces were bright with relief. Others showed the determination that still burned inside them. She knew the work was not done. She knew other companies would watch and learn. After the meeting, Ava invited her senior leaders to lunch at a nearby cafe. As they walked through the streets, she noticed the city felt different. People seemed friendlier. A barista smiled extra wide when she handed over her coffee card. Some recognized her and offered congratulations. It felt good. It felt like kindness rippling out. Lunch. They toasted to the team's hard work and to the change they had inspired. The general counsel raised her glass of iced tea and said, "This is more than a win for us. It's a lesson for every leader. Your values matter." A diversity committee added, "I've already received emails from other CEOs asking how we did it. They want our process and our letter template." Everyone laughed, but Ava felt a serious pride. They were setting an example. That afternoon, Ava spoke again, this time at a small panel event on corporate ethics. She told the story of the flight, the humiliation, the boardroom showdown, and the ultimatum. She emphasized that it was not anger that drove her, but a deep sense of fairness. Her words resonated. Audience members leaned forward. Some wiped tears. A young woman in the front row raised her hand to ask how to stand up in her own company when she saw injustice. Ava answered gently, telling her to gather allies, to speak calmly, and to use facts and influence. Combined with preparation, could move mountains. That night, Ava returned home. She sat quietly in her living room, drinking a cup of tea. Her family gathered around her, her mother, her sister, even her teenage niece. They hugged her and asked her to tell the story again. And so she did, describing the cabin lights, the questions in the service corridor, the moment she decided to use her funding as leverage. Her niece looked at her with wide eyes and said, "When I grow up, I want to be brave like you." Ava felt tears well up. She hugged her niece and said, "You already are brave. You just have to trust yourself." In the days that followed, the airline's social media channels posted updates on the training. Videos showed staff in workshops discussing bias and role-playing exercises. The airline's CEO appeared on morning shows, talking about the changes and the importance of respect. News outlets ran follow-up stories, calling this a turning point in corporate accountability. Other airlines faced pressure to review their own policies. A ripple effect spread through the travel industry. Ava watched it all unfold, thinking of the many people who board planes every day, carrying hopes and dreams, never expecting to be treated unfairly. She thought of regular travelers who might have felt anxious in airports. She thought of business travelers who might have felt sidelined. She thought of every person who had ever faced a moment when they felt less than equal. She felt grateful that she could help shine a light on that. One afternoon, she received a call from a friend who ran a nonprofit that worked with refugees. The friend said they had used Ava's story in their training materials, teaching volunteers to stand up when they witnessed discrimination. Another call came from a teacher who said she had shared the story with her students to show the power of speaking out. Ava felt her heart swell. The impact was now beyond the airline. It was in classrooms, in community centers, in offices around the world. Back at her company, Ava led a meeting to integrate lessons from this experience into their own culture. They decided to add a new module to their employee onboarding, teaching respect and inclusion alongside product training. They updated their own travel policies, adding clear steps to report and address discrimination. By taking these steps, they showed that leaders must hold themselves to the highest standard, not only when facing a crisis, but always. Months later, the independent audit of the airline's training came in. The report noted that over 90% of staff had completed the training, that anonymous surveys showed a marked improvement in passenger treatment, that managers were regularly reviewing incidents to prevent bias. The airline published the report on its website. Industry analysts praised the transparency. The airline's stock price tightened, and customer satisfaction scores rose. The financial world saw that doing the right thing could also be good business. Ava read that report with a sense of satisfaction. She closed her eyes and remembered how powerless she had felt in the JetBridge corridor. Now she felt empowered not by money or title, but by purpose. She knew that leadership meant responsibility, and that influence must be used for good. On a quiet Sunday morning, Ava laced up her running shoes and went for a jog in the park. The city was calm, the trees green. She ran past joggers and families, nodding and smiling. She felt at peace. As she ran, she thought about the future. New heights for her company, new challenges to face, new people to uplift. She knew injustice would still exist. But she also knew that courage and conviction could change the world, one action at a time. When she returned home, she sat on her porch and watched the sun climb higher in the sky. She sipped her coffee and reflected on the journey she had taken from a CEO, pulled off a plane to a leader who pulled $5 billion of funding to demand respect. She realized that real power lay not in the money itself, but in using it to protect human dignity. She felt hopeful that others would follow her example. And as the day began, Ava made a promise to herself that she would keep standing up, keep speaking out, keep using her voice for those who could not speak as loudly. She would remember the faces she saw on that flight, the looks of shock and solidarity in the cabin, and the feeling of power that came when she chose action over silence. She would carry those lessons forward, day after day, in every decision she made, because she knew that respect once given could change the world, and that it was her duty to make sure it was never taken for granted again.